The mask smelled of someone else's perfume, and that was the first lie. Navarra had counted 41 lies since dusk, and the dance had not yet ended. The gown was a lie. Borrowed silk, the color of deep water, cut for a woman a hand taller than she was. The jewels at her throat were a lie. The name, everyone in the great hall of Caldmere believed they were watching move beneath the chandeliers, was the largest lie of all. And it was not her name. She kept her eyes down, the way she had been told. Aluna at the veiled choosing did not speak and did not look up. She let herself be turned and turned again, and the hand, at the small of her back, guided her, as though she weighed nothing. The hand belonged to the Alpha King. He was taller than the rumors, and, quieter. She had expected a beast in a crown, all teeth and appetite. Instead there was only this, a slow, certain pressure between her shoulder blades, and a voice pitched low enough that only she could hear it. "You are trembling," Emmerich said. "You needn't. It is only a dance." It was not only a dance, and they both knew it, though only one of them knew why. When the last bell of midnight struck, the masks would come away, and the Alpha's wolf would confirm before the whole pack the mate it had chosen in the dark. That was the whole of the ceremony. A wolf could not be fooled by a face, the elders said. A wolf knew its own. Which was exactly why Vesper had sent Navarra in her place. Fail, her cousin had instructed her, cold as river stone. Dance badly, feel nothing, let his wolf find no mate in you, and the match dissolves, and no one is harmed. Do this, and your mother keeps her bed and her medicine through the winter. Refuse, and she does not. So, Nevada had come to feel nothing, which was the one thing in all the world she was certain she could do. She was hollow-born. There was no wolf in her to answer his. That was the secret her whole life had been built to hide, and tonight, for the first time, her emptiness was meant to be a mercy. The first bell tolled. She counted it the way she had counted the lies. 1. His hand shifted at her back, and warmth moved through the silk where his palm rested. The second bell. 2. The warmth did not fade. It spread, low and strange, pooling somewhere beneath her ribs where nothing had ever stirred before. Navarra's breath caught. That was wrong. That was impossible. She had nothing inside her to warm. Third bell. Fourth. She made the mistake of looking up. His eyes found hers through the slots of the mask, and something crossed his face that she had no name for, something that stripped away the boredom of a king performing a duty, and left him looking almost afraid. His steps slowed. His grip tightened. "Who are you?" he breathed. Not a question, a discovery. Fifth bell. 6. The warmth had become a pull. Now a hook set behind her breastbone, drawing her toward him, and Nevera understood, with rising horror, that whatever was happening in the hollow of her chest, his wolf had felt it too. Heads were turning. The music thinned. Somewhere at the edge of the hall she saw Vesper go very still, one gloved hand rising to her mouth. 8th, 9th, 10th. "Stop," Navarra whispered. "Please, you don't understand." 11th bell. He lifted his hand to her jaw with a tenderness that made her want to weep. "I have looked for you my whole life," he said. The 12th bell struck. All across the hall, gloved hands rose to painted masks. And because there was no version of this night in which she was permitted to run, Nevera closed her eyes, took hold of the silk at her temple, and pulled the mask away. The perfume went with it. The lie went with it. 700 faces looked upon the woman the Alpha King's wolf had chosen, and 700 throats made the same sound at once, a single indrawn breath. And then the silence after it, which was worse. Emmerich stared at her. The tenderness drained from his face like color from a struck man. "You are not Vesper," he said. For a moment no one in the hall moved, and Nevera thought absurdly of the frozen ponds behind her mother's cottage, how the whole surface would hold perfectly still an instant before it cracked. Then it cracked. Vesper reached them first, and she was magnificent in her fury. which was itself a performance, for Nevera alone knew the fury was relief wearing a borrowed face. "She stole my place," Vesper cried, loud enough for the farthest corner. "She stole my mask and my gown and made a mockery of the choosing. Guards take her. No one takes anyone." The voice belonged to an old woman who walked with two canes and needed neither. Eldermarn had kept the law of Caldmere for 60 years, and the hall went quiet for her, as it had not gone quiet for the king. She came forward, through the parting crowd, and looked at Navarra for a long, weighing moment, and then she looked at Emmerich, and what she saw in his face made her mouth thin. "The wolf chose," Eldermarn said. "The wolf was deceived," Vesper snapped. "The wolf does not see faces, child. You of all people should know the law you tried to cheat." The old woman turned to the hall and lifted one cane, and 700 wolves fell silent under it. At the veiled choosing, the Alpha's wolf reaches past the mask, past the name, past the blood, and it takes hold of the one soul in all the world that answers it. That is why we mask, so that nothing but the truth may choose. The bond has flared. I felt it from across the hall, and so did every wolf in this room. It cannot be unfelt, it cannot be unmade. By the oldest law we keep, it is done. It is not done. Emmerich had not raised his voice, and somehow that was louder than Vesper's shrieking. He stood apart from Nevera now, and the space between them felt to her like a wound. "I do not know this woman. I have never seen her face. She wore another's name into a sacred rite. Whatever my wolf did, my wolf was lied to. Your wolf was told the truth by the only sense that cannot lie." Eldermarn's voice gentled, which was somehow the cruelest thing she could have done. "I am sorry, Emmerich. I know this is not the night you were promised, but the bond does not ask our permission, and it did not ask yours." Nevera found her voice at last, and hated how small it was. "I did not want this. I swear to you I never wanted it. I was made to come. My mother, she—" "Be silent," Emmerich said, without looking at her, and she was. Across the hall, a man leaned in the shadow of a pillar, with his arms folded, watching the king's ruin, with the mild interest of a man watching rain. Navarra did not yet know his name was Corvin, or that Vesper's stillness a moment ago had been for him. She knew only that he was smiling, and that no one else in the hall was. "There is the matter of the naming," Eldermarn went on, and now she spoke only to Emmerich, quieter, as if the words might hurt less delivered softly. "You have until the harvest moon to present a bonded Luna to the pack, or the throne passes to a line that can. You know this. You chose the choosing yourself to settle it. Well, it is settled. This is your Luna, or you have none, and Caldmere has another king by autumn." Emmerich looked at Navarra, then truly looked, and she made herself hold his gaze, though it cost her everything. She saw a proud man doing sums in his head, and hating every answer. She saw the exact moment he understood that a stranger in a stolen gown had, in the space of 12 bells, become the only thing standing between him and the loss of everything he was. "Rennick," he said. A broad man detached himself from the dais, the king's beta with a soldier's stillness and kind tired eyes. "My king, see the lady to the east chambers, post a guard." A pause. "For her safety, not her confinement. Make certain she knows the difference." He turned from her, from all of them. His shoulders set, like a man walking into weather. "The rest of you have a choosing to forget. Go home." He was 3 steps toward the doors when Vesper caught Nevera's wrist and put her lips to her ear, and her whisper was so soft and so sweet that anyone watching would have thought it comfort. "You should have failed," Vesper breathed. "Now, you'll wish you had." The east chambers were larger than the whole of the cottage Navarra had grown up in, and colder, and she sat awake in the middle of the great bed until the sky went gray because sleep felt like a thing that belonged to people whose lives still fit them. She had been Luna of Caldmere for one night, and already she understood that the title was a trap with velvet walls. By day she was the wrong woman in borrowed rooms. She wore the gowns the maids brought, and let them dress her hair, and said thank you, in a voice they clearly found strange in Aluna's mouth, and she watched their eyes move over her the way eyes had moved over her all her life, searching for the thing that was missing and not quite finding it. The head maid was a silver-haired woman named Odette, who had served 3 lunas before her, and made no secret of finding the 4th a poor bargain. She came close to fasten the clasps at the back of the gown, closer than the work required, and Navara felt the old woman's breath change, felt her go still the way a hound goes, still over a scent it cannot place. "You smell of the marsh, my lady," Odette said slowly, green, like cut weed. Navara's heart slammed once against her ribs. "A tonic," she said, and was astonished at how level it came out. "For the nerves, my mother's recipe. I have worn it since I was a girl." Odette's pale eyes searched her face a moment longer, and Navara made herself think of nothing, of frozen ponds, of empty rooms, anything but the sprigs of myra bloom stitched into her hem 3 inches from the old woman's hand. Then Odette stepped back and smoothed the silk with a servant's flat courtesy. "As you say, my lady." But she did not quite stop watching her, and when she left the door open a hand's width, and Nevra understood that in this house even the walls had noses, and that one careless day would be the end of her. Because there was a thing missing. That was the truth beneath every other truth, the one that had shaped every closed shutter of her childhood. Navara had no wolf. She had learned the word for it the way children learn the words for their own wounds, slowly and by accident, hollow-born. 1 in 10,000, her mother had said, born to wolf blood, and yet empty of the wolf, carrying the shape of a shifter, and none of the fire. To the pack, it was worse than deformity. A hollow-born, could not run at the moon, could not scent a lie, could not stand as the mother of an alpha's line. In the old days, they had been left on the mountain. In the newer days they were simply hidden, married off far and quiet, spoken of in the low voice, reserved for shame. Sorrel had hidden her daughter well, shutters drawn against the neighbors. A charm of dried myra bloom sewn into the hem of every dress, its green scent thick enough to blur the sharp noses of visiting kin. "No wolf to sense," her mother would say, tucking the sprigs tight, "and no nose to sense there's no wolf. Keep the green about you, my heart, and they smell only the herb." It was the myra bloom, Navara now understood, that had let her walk into a hall of 700 wolves and be taken for a high-born Luna. It was sewn into the hem of Vesper's stolen gown even now, and it was the thing she would have to guard more carefully than her own heartbeat, because in Caldmere, a woman who could not shift was not merely unfit to be Luna. She was a fraud upon a sacred bond, and Nevera did not want to learn what the law did to such a woman, yet the bond had flared. That was the piece that would not lie still in her mind, turning and turning through the gray hours. She had gone to that dance certain of nothing so much as her own emptiness, and something had warmed in her all the same. Something had answered him. Her mother had told her a story once, only once. On a night when the fever had loosened her tongue, "There is one way the hollow may be filled," Sorrel had whispered, her hand hot and dry in Navara's. "It is old, and it is cruel, and I would not have you hope on it, but you should know it lives. A hollow-born's wolf is not gone, it sleeps, curled so deep that nothing can reach it, nothing but one thing. If her true mate should love her, truly love her, not her face, nor her use, nor the peace she brings, but her, the whole of her, freely and knowing all, then the love wakes what was sleeping, the wolf opens its eyes, and she is whole, and no one can ever call her hollow again." Navara had asked, in the reckless way of a child, whether it had ever happened. Once, her mother had said and would say no more, and in the morning had denied ever speaking of it. Now, Navara sat in a stranger's palace, with a bond humming faint and unwelcome beneath her ribs, and she did the sum the way she had watched the king do his. If the story was true, then the very thing that could make her whole was the love of the man who could not look at her without flinching. And the very thing she must hide from him to survive, her hollowness, was the thing his love was meant to cure. She could not tell him what she was, for he would cast her out, or worse. And if she never told him, he could never love the whole of her, and the wolf would sleep on forever. It was a trap folded so neatly that she almost admired it. The knock came, at mid-morning. She expected a maid, and got the king. Emeric stood in the doorway in plain dark clothes, no crown, looking as though he, too, had not slept. His gaze went once around the room, marking the untouched bed, and something in his jaw eased a fraction, though she could not think why it should. "I have come to tell you how this will be," he said. "May I?" She stood, uncertain of the courtesy owed between two people the moon had shackled together against their will. "It is your palace. It is your chambers." He stepped inside, but no farther than he had to. "Here is the truth of our situation, and I will not insult you by dressing it. I did not want this. You did not want this. But the law is the law, and if I set you aside, I lose the throne to men who would be far worse for Caldmere than a reluctant king and a stranger for Aluna. So, we are bound, you and I, whether we like it or not. What I can offer you is this. I will not touch you, I will not force the marking, nor the bed, nor anything you do not freely give. To the pack, we will seem a mated pair. Between these walls you may be a stranger who owes me nothing. That is the most honest thing I have to give, and I am sorry it is not more." Navarra looked at this hard, proud, exhausted man, offering her the one gift she had not dared hope for, distance, and felt her throat close. "Why," she managed, "you could take what the law grants you. Most men would." Something flickered across his face, there and gone. "My father took what the law granted him," he said. "I watched my mother learn to smile when he entered a room. I swore a long time ago I would never make a woman do that." He turned to go, then paused with his hand on the door. "The pack shifts 3 nights hence, the full moon running. All of Caldmere runs together beneath it. As Luna, you are expected to run at my side." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. 3 nights. She could not run. She would never run. And on the one night when every wolf in the kingdom loosed its true shape beneath the open sky, a woman with no shape at all would stand exposed in the light of the very moon that was meant to claim her. "Of course," she heard herself say. He studied her a moment longer, and she had the sudden terror that he could see straight through the myra bloom to the emptiness beneath. But he only nodded, and left. It was Rennick who came an hour later, the beta with the tired, kind eyes. Bearing a tray, he clearly considered beneath his station, and carrying it anyway. He set it down, and did not leave, and turned his cap over in his broad hands like a man with something difficult to say. "You'll forgive me speaking plain, my lady. It's a habit the king tolerates, and no one else does." He waited for her small nod. "The running is watched, not by him, he'd not think to, but by the others, the ones who wanted a different Luna in these rooms, and haven't given up wanting it. A Luna who runs weak, or slow, or not at all. They'll take it as proof the bond is false, and a false bond is a thing they can bring before the elders." His jaw worked. "I don't know what you are, my lady, and I've decided I don't want to. But I know fear when I sit across from it, and you've the look of a woman with a great deal to lose. So I'll say only this: whatever you mean to do, 3 nights hence do it well, and do it where the wrong eyes can't reach." He picked up his cap, bowed, and was gone before she could find a single word. Nevera sat alone in the great, cold room, with 3 nights between herself and ruin, a court that smelled her lies, a rival who wanted her destroyed, and a bond she could not explain, thrumming faint and treacherous beneath her heart, and no earthly idea how she would survive any of it. 3 days can be a long time to learn to lie with your whole body. By the night of the running, Nevera had rehearsed 100 small deceptions and believed in none of them. She stood at the edge of the moor, with the pack gathering around her in the blue dark, hundreds of them, shedding cloaks and boots and the manners of people, their breath already coming rough with the nearness of the change. The moon had not yet cleared the ridge. When it did, every soul on this moor but one would answer it. Emmerich stood beside her, close enough for the watchers to mark, and said quietly, "You do not have to keep pace with me. Run your own road." The pack scatters at the crest and finds its own way home by dawn. No one counts the miles of a Luna. She understood the gift in it before she understood the words. He was giving her leave to vanish into the dark and be unwatched. Whether he knew what he was sparing her, she could not tell, and did not dare ask. "Thank you," she said. The moon came over the ridge. It went through the pack, like wind through wheat. All around her, bodies bent and broke and remade themselves, the shudder and rush of it, the low chorus of throats finding a shape that had no words, and then fur and muscle and the bright animal joy of 500 wolves pouring up the slope in a river of silver and shadow. Emmerich was among them. She saw the great dark wolf that had been her husband turn once to find her with eyes she would have known anywhere, and then he was gone, swept up the moor with his people. And Navarra stood alone on 2 feet under the full moon, exactly as hollow as she had always been, and ran the only way she could, on foot, into the trees, before anyone circled back and found their Luna standing when she should have been flying. She did not go far before she heard the voices. She would not have heard them at all if the wind had not turned. 2 people, low and urgent, in the shelter of a fallen oak, and Navarra went to her knees in the bracken out of pure animal instinct, and then went still, because she knew both voices. "It should have ended it," Vesper was saying, taut with a fury she never showed in daylight. "One clumsy girl who feels nothing, his wolf should have turned from her, and the whole farce would have collapsed, and I would be free of him. Instead, the fool thing chose her. Chose her, Corvin. Do you know what it costs me to smile at that creature in her stolen crown? It cost you patience, and you have never had much." A man's voice, amused, unhurried. Nevera had heard it once, from the mouth of a man leaning against a pillar while a king came apart. "Corvin. Peace, love, it changes nothing that matters. A bond can be broken as easily as it was made, if the right eyes see the right proof. And they will. A Luna who cannot run. A Luna who flinches from the mark. The pack is already whispering. We do not need to break the bond ourselves. We need only let Kaldmir watch it fail, and stand ready when the throne comes loose." "And Emmerich? Emmerich?" Corvin said, and the warmth went out of his voice entirely. "Will not see the harvest moon as king. One way or another." Nevera's blood turned to river water. She had come to the moor a coward, hiding a private shame, and she was crouched now in the bracken holding the life of a kingdom in her 2 empty hands. Vesper had never wanted him. The decoy, the humiliation, all of it, had been a door Vesper meant to walk through into Corvin's arms, and the wolf, choosing Navarra, had slammed that door shut. The very bond she despised, the burden she had cursed for 3 sleepless nights, was the only thing that had stood between Emmerich and the men who meant to end him. She had saved him. Without wolf, without knowing, hollow, to the very bone, she had reached out of her own emptiness and pulled a king back from a grave he never saw coming. The thought was still turning to wonder in her chest when Corvin went suddenly quiet and lifted his head and scented the air. Navarra stopped breathing. She watched him turn slowly toward the fallen oak, toward the bracken, toward her, his nostrils working, a frown gathering between his brows. She thought of the myra bloom sewn into her hem, green and thick and screaming marshweed into the night, and she prayed to it the way other people prayed to gods. "What is it?" Vesper murmured. Corvin held still a long moment more. Then his shoulders eased. "Nothing. Weeds and old bones." He laughed. "Lo, this place is thick with rot. Come, The pack turns for home soon, and we must be seen to have run with them." Their footsteps faded up the slope. Nevera stayed in the bracken, shaking, until the moon began its long fall toward the far trees. And only then did she rise on legs that barely held her and pick her way back toward the moor, a woman with no wolf and a secret that could hang her, carrying a second secret now that could save a king. Dawn found her at the moor's edge, and Emeric found her there too. He came up out of the mist on 2 feet again, barefoot and plainly dressed, his dark hair loose, and there was a question in his face he was too courteous to ask. She knew how she must look, bracken in her hair, her hem soaked, a woman who had plainly not run a wolf's road all night. "You are unhurt," he said. Not a question. A thing he needed to be true. He looked at her a moment longer, and she braced for the asking. "For how far did you run, and I did not see you on any road? And what were you doing in the low woods?" It did not come. Whatever he saw in her white face he chose, the way he kept choosing. Not to reach for it. "Then come home," he said, and offered her his arm. She took it. His skin was warm from the change, and where her hand closed on his forearm, the bond gave a small contented turn, like a cat settling, and for one treacherous moment she let herself lean into the solid fact of him, this man she had saved and could not warn, this man who had handed her the dark to hide in without once asking why she needed it. "You ran a strange road tonight," he said, not looking at her as the mist thinned around them. "I could not find your trail anywhere on the moor." Her heart stopped. "I kept to the low ground," she said. "The trees." A pause that lasted 100 years. "The low ground is treacherous by night. Keep to the high roads next moon, where I can find you." And that was all. But she heard the thing folded inside it, gentle as a blade in wool, that he had looked for her, and had not found her, and had noticed, and was letting her keep the lie for now. Nevera walked home on the arm of a king with 2 secrets, now instead of 1, and could not have said which of them frightened her more. After the running, something between them changed shape, the way the moor had changed shape under the moon quietly, and all at once he began to come to her in the evenings. Not to the bed, never that. He would knock and wait to be answered, and then he would take the chair by the cold hearth on the far side of the room, a careful distance she had come to be grateful for and, lately, to resent, and they would talk until the candles guttered. He told her which of the court to trust and which to watch. She learned the names of the great houses and the old grievances between them, and found she had a memory for it that made him lift an eyebrow. "You have the whole tangle of it already," he said one night, half accusing. "3 generations of feuds. I have spent my life trying to hold in my head, and you have them in a fortnight." "I spent 20 years with nothing to do but listen through walls," she said, before she could stop herself. "You learn to hold what you hear. You never know which piece keeps you safe." He was quiet at that. She felt the question gather in him, felt it through the thin humming thread that ran between them, and felt him decide, again, to let it lie. "Safe from what?" he said instead lightly, giving her the room to make it nothing. "From boredom," she said, and he let her have it, and smiled. And something in the smile undid a knot in her she had not known was tied. Some nights they did not speak of the court at all. He told her about his mother a little, how she had loved the high, cold gardens and taught him the names of stars no one else at court could be troubled to learn. She told him about the shuttered cottage, carefully leaving out its reason, and found that with the reason removed there was still a childhood left underneath, a marsh full of frogs, a mother who sang while she dried her herbs, and it startled her to hear herself laugh telling it. She did not tell him about Corvin. A dozen times the words rose to her teeth, and a dozen times they died there, because every road to that truth ran through the other one, the one that would end her. And she began, in a way she could not explain, and did not welcome, to feel him. It came only when he was near and only in flashes, a warmth or a weariness, or once, a flare of something sharp and startled when their hands brushed over the same book. She told herself it was fancy. But the bond hummed under her ribs when he entered her room. Now, steady as a second pulse, and she was beginning to understand that whatever the wolf had done at the choosing, it had built a road between them that ran so far. She could feel the edges of him. He could feel nothing of her, because there was nothing in her to feel. The court did not soften as the leaves turned. If anything, it sharpened for the harvest moon, and the naming drew nearer by the day, and Corvin's quiet work was doing exactly what he had promised it would. The whispers found her everywhere now, a Luna in name only. A bond that bore no mark, she heard a lord murmur to another, behind a hand that hid nothing, that a true, mated pair would have sealed it long ago, and that a bond unsealed by the naming was a bond the elders could set aside. That night she made her decision, and it frightened her more than the Moor had. If the pack needed to see the bond sealed, then she would seal it, the mate mark. The oldest binding there was, the one no elder could question, and no faction could unmake. And beneath that reasoning, under the cold politics of it, ran a warmer current. She was ashamed to look at directly. She wanted it. She wanted him, this grave, kind man, who kept choosing not to wound her. And if her mother's story held even a grain of truth, then to lie in his arms, to be his in earnest, was the one road that might wake the sleeping thing inside her and make her whole. She went to him before she could lose her nerve. He rose when she came into his study, as he always rose for her, and whatever he saw in her face made the welcome in his own go still and wary. Navarra, the court says our bond is false, because it bears no mark. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. So let us make them wrong, let us seal it. Tonight, she made herself hold his eyes. I am offering, Emmerich, not for the throne, for us. Whatever we are. For a moment, something leapt in his face, unmistakable there, and gone. And through the thin bright thread of the bond she felt it too, a surge of wanting so strong, it stole her breath. And then, deliberately, like a man closing a shutter, he put it away. No, he said gently, not like this. The word landed somewhere beneath her ribs and kept falling. I do not understand, she said. You came to that dance because you were made to. You came to these rooms because the law left you nowhere else to go. And now you come to me because a pack of frightened lords has told you that you must. He shook his head slowly. I will not be the third cage you were driven into, Navarra. When my father wanted my mother, he took her, and told himself her duty was the same as her willing. I watched what it made of her. I will not do that to you and call it a marriage. When you come to me, if ever you do, it will be because you want to, and for no other reason, under the moon. Not for the throne, not for the pack. His jaw tightened. Tonight, it is all three, so, no. He meant it as mercy. She knew, even in the moment, watching his honest, miserable face, that he meant it as the kindest thing he had. But he had not felt the bond leap in her at the sight of him. He did not know that under the politics she had come wanting him for himself. He had heard only the reasons she gave and refused them all, and what Navarra understood, standing there with her offering in her two hands, and no way to prove the truest part of it, was this: he did not want her. Not the hollow girl in the borrowed crown. And a man who did not want her could never, ever love her. And the thing that slept in her would sleep until she died. Of course, she said, from very far away. Forgive me, I misjudged. She was proud. Later that she made it to the corridor before the tears came. She did not go to her rooms. She could not bear the great cold bed and its accusation, so she climbed instead to the high battlements her mother would have loved, where the cold gardens gave way to open sky, and she stood there in the wind until her face was numb and her thinking cleared into something hard and flat. She had offered him everything she had, and named every reason but the true one, and he had refused the reasons and never guessed the truth. That was the cruelty folded inside the mercy. A man who took her only from duty would at least have touched her. A man who refused her from honor left her exactly as hollow as she had begun, and kinder men, she was learning, could wound you in places that crueler men could never reach. Below her, somewhere in the dark of his study, was the one road to waking the sleeping thing inside her, and it was barred by the very goodness that made her want to walk it. He would never take her out of duty. And he would never love her, because he did not know there was anything in her to love beyond a frightened girl and a stolen crown. She had thought for a few warm evenings by a cold hearth that the road ran two ways. It did not. It ran toward him and stopped at a shut door, and she had been a fool to lean on it. The wind found the wet on her face and made it ice. Let it, she thought. Ice was easier to carry than hope. She did not speak to him for 4 days, and he, to his credit, or his cowardice, did not force it. The summons broke the silence for them. It came from the neutral ground at Greywater Ford, where the packs of the Low Country met each autumn to trade grievances and grain before the hard moons, and it could not be refused, for a king who hid from the moot was a king with something to hide. So they went, the two of them, and Rennick and a thin guard, riding north into a cold that smelled of the turning year. Nevera watched the country change, and said little. She had a thing she had to do, and the 4 silent days had only made it heavier. She had to warn him. She had spent them turning the problem over, and had found no clean way through it. No way to say Corvin means to kill you before the harvest moon, that did not end with, but how could you know, and no lie to answer that question that Emeric's honest eyes would believe. And so the warning sat in her like a stone, and Greywater Ford, where Corvin's own people would be gathered, was the last place on earth she wished to carry it. The moot was a sprawl of tents and cook-fires along the Grey River, loud with 100 packs, and Corvin's banner flew among them, a black bird on a field of ash. Nevera saw it, and felt the stone in her turn over. She kept close to Emeric as they moved through it, and marked how the crowd read them, the sidelong looks, the conversations that dropped to half-tone as the royal party passed and rose again behind them, thick with meaning. A king and a Luna who did not touch, a Luna who walked a careful pace from her mate. Every eye at Greywater Ford seemed to know the measure of that distance, and to be counting it. Vesper found them within the hour, of course. She came smiling through the crowd in furs worth a farmer's whole life, and kissed the cold air beside Nevera's cheek, and looked her over with the fond attention of a cat at a nest. "Cousin, how well the crown suits you." Her voice was honey. "And how brave to wear it here, of all places, so many eyes, so many old families who remember how the choosing was meant to go." She tilted her head. "You look tired, dear heart. Does the great cold bed not agree with you? They do say a bond unsealed sits ill in a body, like a debt unpaid." "It agrees with me well enough," Nevera said. "And yet, the whole Ford is whispering that our king has yet to mark his Luna." Vesper's eyes glittered. "People will wonder what is wrong with her, that he will not, or what is wrong with him." She let it hang, sweet as rot, then leaned an inch closer, and her voice dropped to something meant only for Nevera. "I gave you one chance to fail quietly, and you would not take it. Remember that, whatever comes. You could have gone home to your marsh. You chose the crown instead." She straightened, bright again. "But come, there's a welcome cup for the royal party. Corvin insisted on it himself. He does so want to drink to your health." She pressed a cup of dark wine into Nevera's hand, and another she carried toward Emeric, where he stood in grave conversation with the elders of 3 packs, and Nevera looked down into the wine, red-black, in the failing light. And then across the crowd to where Corvin stood watching them both, with the patient smile of a man who has waited a long time and knows the waiting is nearly done. "Something is wrong," the bond said, in the wordless way it had. It was not her own thought. It was his, a thread of unease she had no name for, and it reached her an instant before her own eyes found the thing that had troubled his. Corvin was not watching the crowd. He was watching the cup in Emmerich's hand, and in the space of a breath, Navarra understood three things at once. The way you understand a fall only after your feet have left the ground. That the welcome cup was the proof of every whispered word tonight. That she was the only soul at Greywater Ford who knew the blackbird meant to see her husband dead before the harvest moon. And that Emmerich, courteous to the last, had already raised the wine to drink to the health of the man who had poisoned it. There was no time to think, and so Nevera did not think. She moved. She struck the cup from Emmerich's hand the instant before it reached his mouth, and the dark wine flew out in a long arc and spattered black across the trampled grass, and where it fell, the frost hissed and browned, as though the ground itself had been burned. A ring of faces turned. Emmerich stared down at his empty hand, then at her, and she watched him understand, watched the courtesy fall away, and the soldier come up beneath it. "Corvin," Emmerich said, very quietly. But Corvin was already moving, because a plot that cannot poison quietly must strike loud, and there was a blade in his hand now, thin and wet and shining with the same dark stuff that had burned the grass. And it was not aimed at the king. It was aimed at the woman who had ruined him. It was aimed at Navarra. She saw it come and could not make her body move. She had no wolf to make her fast. She was only a woman standing still while death crossed the last few feet toward her throat, and she had time to think, with strange calm, that she had saved him after all, that it was a fair trade, and she closed her eyes. The blow did not land. Emmerich hit her sideways and took the blade in the shoulder that should have been her neck, and the sound he made was not a sound a man makes. It was lower and older than that, the roar of the wolf beneath the man. And for one instant Navarra saw it flood up into his eyes, gold and furious. Then the poison reached it. She felt the exact moment along the thread between them. A scream, and then a guttering, like a great fire doused in a single breath, and the gold went out of his eyes, and Emmerich folded to the frozen ground with a rival's poison already burning through him, and his own snarl fading in his throat. The moot became a riot. Rennick was there, and the thin guard, blades out. And Corvin was gone into the crowd like smoke. And Vesper was screaming that the king had been attacked as though she had not poured the cup herself. Nevera did not hear most of it. She was on her knees in the burned grass with Emmerich's head in her lap, pressing both hands to the wound as the black stuff welled up through her fingers, and she was saying his name, only his name, over and over, as if the word were a rope she could throw him. My Lady Rennick had her by the shoulder, his voice cutting through the roar. "My lady, we cannot hold this ground. Half these packs are Corvin's before they are ours, and they have seen the king fall. If we stay, we lose him to the crowd before the poison ever gets its chance." He was already lifting Emmerich, gray with the effort, another guard taking the weight on the other side. The old lodge at the ford's edge. "Can you run, my lady?" She could not run, she never would. But she could hold the wound closed with both hands while stronger people carried the man beneath it, and she did, stumbling beside them through the dark and the shouting. And it struck her even then, half hysterical, that this was the truest marriage she and Emmerich had yet managed, the two of them fleeing through the night, each keeping the other alive, by whatever poor means they had. They carried him to a low stone lodge at the ford's edge, and the healer came, a lean, gray woman named Myra, with clever cold hands, and she took one look at the wound and one breath of the smell rising off it, and her mouth went flat. "Wolfsbane," Myra said. "Distilled past anything I have met, it will not kill an alpha of his blood." She hesitated, and in the hesitation Nevera heard the rest before it came. "But it hunts the wolf, my lady. It is made to. I have seen it once before, long ago. The man lived. The wolf did not." "Then wake it," Navarra said. "Draw it out. Do something." "There is nothing to draw. It is not a fever to break." Mara was already grinding something bitter and green in a bowl. "I can keep the flesh from rotting and the heart from stopping. The rest is between him and a thing I cannot touch." Keep him warm. Keep him still. And keep this room empty, my lady, for a wounded alpha is a proud creature, and he will not want to be watched while he loses the best part of himself. So Navarra emptied the room. She sent the healers to sleep in shifts beyond the door and took the long dark hours herself, because there was a second reason to keep the room empty that she could tell no one, which was that a woman with Meyerblum in her hem could not afford clever, cold hands too near her for too long. Near midnight, the fever took him, and he began to speak. Before that, though, there was the near thing, and Never's heart did not stop racing from it for an hour. Mara had wanted to sit the first watch herself, to change the poultice through the night, and it had taken all of Never's frayed will to send her away. He would not want to be seen, she had said, borrowing the healer's own words back at her, and Meyer had given her a long gray look that saw more than Navarra liked before she went. Because the truth was that a healer with clever hands would sit close through a long night and lean near and breathe, and no amount of Meyerblum survived that kind of nearness forever. Navra had traded her husband's dignity for her own safety and hated herself for the trade even as she made it, and locked the one door behind the healer's back. He did not know her. His eyes opened and slid over her, and found nothing they recognized, and Nevra's breath caught, until she understood it was not her face he had lost, but the sense beneath it, the wolf knowing that had let him find her in a hall of 700 masks. Without it, he was as blind as she had always been, as hollow. "Where is she?" he said, thick and urgent, trying to rise. "Navarra." He wanted Navarra. The blade was for her. "Is she? Someone must. She cannot defend herself. She has no." He stopped. His hand groped across the blankets and found hers and gripped it hard. "Keep her safe," he said to the stranger he thought she was. "Promise me. She thinks no one wants her. She has spent her whole life thinking it. I can see it on her. And she is wrong. Do you hear me? She is wrong. Promise me you will keep her safe." Navra sat with the dark of the wound drying on her hands, and his plea in her ears, and felt something in her chest tear clean down the middle. He was dying by degrees, losing the thing that made him an alpha, and the only name in his fevered mouth was hers. "I promise," she whispered. "I promise she is safe. Rest now. She is right here." His grip eased, his eyes closed, and Nevra bowed her head over the hand of the man who had taken a poisoned blade meant for her throat, and understood, far too late to do either of them any good, that she had gone and fallen in love with her husband. The fever broke on the 4th day. His wolf did not come back. Emmerich woke to a body that would not answer him, senses gone flat and human, the moon gone silent in his blood. He did not rage, that was the worst of it. Nevera had braced for fury, and got instead a terrible quiet, a man moving carefully through a world that had lost a whole dimension, testing for a limb that was no longer there, and finding each time only the absence. They could not stay at the ford, with Corvin's people thick around it, and a king too weak to stand. So they went up into the high country, to a stone holdfast at Mistfell, where the clouds came to rest against the mountain, and where Emmerich said, in one of the few things he said at all on that long climb, his mother had gone each summer to be away from a court that frightened her. It had been shut for 20 years. The gardens had gone to bracken and the shutters hung crooked, and Navarra looked at it and thought of another shuttered house, and understood without being told that they had both been sent here to hide the same shame from the same cruel world. The first days were hard. He would sit at the window that looked out over the valley and not speak, and Navarra, who knew exactly the shape of that silence, let him have it, because she had learned young that a hollow grief cannot be argued with, only survived. She kept the fires lit. She learned the ruined kitchen. She sent Rennick down the mountain with letters, and had him bring back word. And the word was never good, for the naming drew closer with every dawn, and a king who could not shift was a king the elders could set aside as surely as a bond that bore no mark. On the 7th night, She found him on the cold terrace in the dark, staring up. "My mother named them for me," he said, without turning. "The stars." Every court in the Low Country thought it a waste, and Alpha learning star names. Like a scholar, she did not care. His jaw worked. "I have forgotten most of them. And now I cannot even smell the frost coming, or hear the deer in the low wood, or feel the pack the way I felt it my whole life, like a second heartbeat. I am a stranger in my own skin, Nevera. I do not know how to be this." And Nevera, who had been a stranger in her own skin since the day she was born, sat down beside him on the cold stone, closer than she had ever let herself sit, and said, "I do." He turned then and looked at her. "You learn the world twice," she said. "Once the way everyone tells you it is, all scent and moon and knowing, and then again, the real way, the quiet way, with your eyes and your hands and your patience. It is a smaller world, but it is not a lesser one. You notice things the wolf would have run straight past." She tipped her head back to the black sky. "That one is the spindle, the bright one under it, at the end of the three. That is the shepherd. Your mother would have taught you those. I taught them to myself, alone, through a gap in a shutter, because they were the one beautiful thing no one could take from me for being what I was." He was very still beside her. "How do you know them?" he said slowly. "When you were raised low and shuttered and you have never once run at a moon, have you, Navara?" The bond hummed. She felt his mind turning, felt him reaching, with senses gone, but a soldier's wits intact, toward a shape in the dark he could almost make out. Her heart slammed. This was the edge of it, her ruin one honest sentence away, and she stood at the lip of that sentence, and could not make herself step off. "No," she said, "I never have." She waited for the next question, the one that would end her. But Emeric only looked at her for a long moment. In the starlight, this hollowed man who had lost the sense that would have named her lie in an instant. And then he did. The thing he always did. He chose not to reach for it. "Then teach me the rest," he said quietly. "The quiet way, all of it. I find I would rather learn the world from you than from anyone who ever had a wolf." And so she did. In the days that followed, she gave him back his mother's mountain, one small human piece at a time. The names of the stars and the tracks of deer, read from the mud instead of the wind, the taste of the cold spring, the way the light came gold across the valley at evening. He was a quick study, and a wry one, and somewhere in it the terrible quiet in him began to thaw. There was a morning, she remembered after, when she woke to the smell of smoke and found him in the ruined kitchen, scowling at a pan, having decided that a man who could no longer hunt could at least learn to cook, and having burned the same flatbread 4 times in a row. "The wolf would have known when to turn it," he said darkly, and Navara had laughed until she had to sit down, and he had looked at her, laughing and forgotten for a moment, to be a broken king. There was an afternoon they spent clearing his mother's garden of 20 years, of bracken hands in the cold black soil, and he told her about the woman who had planted it, the low, sad voice she used at court, and the free one she used up here. And Navara understood that he had brought her to the one place in the world where his mother had been allowed to be herself, and had done it, perhaps, hoping the same mercy for his wife. They laughed. They argued over which star was the shepherd. She won, because she always won, and he accused her of inventing half the sky, and she told him he could hardly prove otherwise, and this was the great advantage of teaching a man who could not check her work. One evening, he asked her to describe the running to him, the real feeling of it, the thing he had lost, and she had to confess she could not, because she had never once felt it either, and they sat with that a while, 2 people at the same window, who had both been shut out of the same door, one from birth and one by a rival's blade. "Then we will not miss it together," he said finally. And there was no bitterness in it, only a strange peace, and never a thought that no one in her whole life had ever offered to be shut out of anything alongside her, and that she would have followed this man off the terrace and into the dark for that sentence alone. It was a strange thing, she reflected later, that the loneliest years of her life had taught her the one skill her wolfless king now needed most, and that the mountain everyone had meant as a prison had turned, quietly, into the first place either of them had ever been fully seen. He took her hand one evening to steady himself on the broken terrace steps, and did not let it go, and she felt through the bond a warmth so simple and so unguarded that it frightened her more than any threat Corvin had ever made. He had not marked her, he had not touched her past that held hand. And still, it was the closest Navarra had ever been to another living soul, and she lay awake most nights turning it over, terrified of how much she had come to want a life she had never once been promised. She was happy. That was the danger of it. For the first time in her life, Navarra was happy, up a shrouded mountain with a wolfless king, and the harvest moon was climbing toward the full, and neither happiness nor mountains had ever yet stopped a moon from rising. Rennick came up the mountain on a lathered horse with the answer nobody had wanted. He laid it on the table without ceremony, a letter in a cramped hand, taken from a rider caught on the Voss road. It named the buyer of the wolfsbane. It named the two hands that had passed it, and it named, in ink, the woman who had commissioned the cup at Greywater Ford, so that no elder in the Low Country could pretend to doubt it any longer. Corvin bought the poison, Rennick said. Vesper poured it, and the letter is meant for the elders of 3 packs, to be read at the naming, arguing that a king who cannot shift is no king, and that the throne should pass to a proven alpha with a strong mate at his side. His tired eyes moved between them, Corvin and Vesper. They mean to walk into the naming as the couple who will save Caldmere from a broken king and his false Luna. And unless something changes, my king, the elders, will hand it to them. Because everything they will say is true. You cannot shift, and the bond still bears no mark. How long? Navarra asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. 9 days to the harvest moon. Rennick turned his cap in his hands. 9 days, my lady, and I will be honest with you both, because I have never learned any other way. I have counted the houses. If the naming were held tomorrow, more than half would stand with Corvin, not because they love him, because they fear a king who cannot lead the running, and a frightened pack reaches for the strong hand, even a cruel one. He looked at Emmerich with something that was close to grief. I have followed you since we were boys. I would follow you with no wolf, and no legs, and no throne at all. But I cannot make 500 families feel the same, and I will not lie and say I can. Emmerich heard all of it without moving, and thanked his beta quietly, and sent him to rest. And it was only after the door closed that the bond carried to Navarra the thing his still face was hiding. Not fear, something worse. A decision, already made, already settling into him the way cold settles into stone. And she knew him well enough by now to know she had very little time to unmake it. The silence after that was long. That night, Emmerich came to her rooms as he had not done since the ford, and stood in the doorway a long moment before he spoke, and Navarra felt through the bond that he had come to say something that was costing him a great deal. There is a way to stop them, he said. Only one. It is why I came. He did not set me aside. Navarra, stand before the naming and declare the bond unfulfilled, and yourself free of it. And take a true alpha. There will be a dozen who will offer the moment you are loosed from me. A whole Luna, a strong one, could hold the throne against Corvin, where a wolfless king cannot. You could save Caldmere. You could save yourself. You have only to let me go. No, she said. Navarra? I said no. You do not understand what I am asking, or what I am. His voice cracked, just slightly, and she felt the fracture run all the way down the thread that joined them. I am a hollow thing, now. I cannot run beside you. I cannot give you the marking without shaming us both when it fails to hold. I cannot even keep you safe. I who could not keep the blade from my own shoulder. You deserve a mate who is whole. There is nothing left in me worth binding your life to. Stop saying that. It is the truth. I have looked at it from every side. These 9 days I have known it was coming, and it is the only truth left. He would not meet her eyes now. When my father grew old and weak, he clung to my mother past all decency, because he could not bear to be a lesser man alone. I swore I would never be him. I would rather cut my own heart out than hold you to a ruin out of fear of being ruined by myself. Let me be the one good thing I have left to give you. Let me let you go. And there it was. The very words she had said to her own reflection in a shuttered glass 1,000 times. Nothing in me worth binding a life to. She crossed the room to him, closer than the Meyerblum had ever let her stand to anyone, and she took his face in her two hands, and she felt through the bond, the thing he was drowning in, the guilt and the grief, and beneath it, buried so deep he plainly thought it hidden, a love so vast and so certain it stopped her breath. You keep saying there is nothing in you worth choosing, she said, as if I did not spend 3 moons learning otherwise. Emeric, there is something I have to tell you. Something I should have told you long ago, and I was too afraid. But I am done, being afraid up this mountain, while men in a hall decide our lives for us. His hands came up and covered hers. Never whatever it is. There is something I should have told you as well, he said, at the exact same moment, and they both stopped. For a heartbeat, the whole truth hung in the air between them, his and hers, so close to being spoken. She could feel it in him through the bond, a thing he had carried as carefully as she had carried hers, pressing now against the back of his teeth, and she thought wildly that they were about to do it, both of them, lay every buried thing on the table at once and see what was left standing when the smoke cleared. She opened her mouth. She had the first word of it on her tongue, the word hollow, the word that had ruled her whole life, ready at last to be spoken aloud to the one person she wanted most to hear it and most feared to lose. And then, Rennick's fist hit the door hard and fast, and his voice came through it tight with alarm. My king! My lady riders on the low road, torches a great many, Corvin's bird on the banners of breath. They are not waiting for the naming. They are coming here. Emeric's hands tightened over hers. The truth folded itself back down, unspoken in both their throats, and Nevada felt the loss of that lost moment, like a physical thing, a door swinging shut an inch from her outstretched hand. How long? Emmerich said. By dawn, said Rennick. No more. For a moment no one moved. Then Emmerich turned to her, and she saw him reach again for the terrible decision he had come in wearing, saw him about to say it again. Set me aside. Save yourself. Use the little time we have to cut yourself loose from a doomed and wolfless man. And Nevera made herself a promise, in the space of that breath, the only kind of promise she had ever kept, which was the kind she made to herself. She would not let the sun come up on a single one of his lies about his own worth, nor on a single one of hers. Whatever she had climbed this mountain to become, she had until sunrise to become it, or lose forever the chance. She did not sleep. She sat by the fire while the holdfast woke and armed itself around her, and she turned her whole life over in her hands, and by the gray before dawn, she had made her choice. She would tell him everything. Not the careful half of it, all of it. And then, whatever it cost her, she would help him meet Corvin at the door as himself, and not as a man made small by a secret his own wife had kept. She found him in the cold hall, buckling on a sword he could barely lift, and she took it gently out of his hands and set it down. Before that, she said, listen, because if this is the last morning, I will not spend it lying to you. She drew a breath that shook. I am hollow-born, Emeric. I have no wolf. I never have. Not asleep, not hidden, not waiting. There is nothing in me for a moon to call. The green scent your court kept catching is Meyerblum, sewn in my hem, because a hollow-born who is found out is not married. She is disposed of. Vesper did not send me to that dance to fail by accident. She sent me because a creature with no wolf could feel nothing, and his wolf would find nothing, and the match would break. That was the whole plan. And it went wrong, all of it, because the one thing no one counted on was that his wolf wanted me anyway. Emmerich had gone utterly still. "And I know Corvin means to kill you," she went on, faster now, before her courage failed. "Because on the night of the first running, when the whole pack ran and I could not, I hid in the low wood, and I heard them. I have carried it for moons and said nothing, because to warn you I would have had to tell you what I am, and I was a coward, and I am so sorry. So, there it is. The whole of me. A wolfless liar who let you walk toward a poisoned cup rather than confess she was a fraud. Now you know why I am nothing worth binding a life to, and you may set me aside with a clear heart when Corvin comes." For a moment that seemed to have no bottom, Emmerich said nothing at all, and Nevera made herself stand and take it, the way she had stood and taken every worst moment of her life. Then he began, quietly, to laugh, and it was not cruel. It was wrecked and wondering, and it broke the last thing in her. "You think you were telling me a secret," he said. "Nevera I have known since the running." She stared at him. "I could not find your trail on the moor because there was no trail, no wolf scent, nothing but marsh herb where my mate should have been. I am a soldier, my heart, I do sums. I knew what you were before we ever came to this mountain, and I said nothing. And I told no soul, because my wolf chose you knowing what my nose could not lie about, and I have never once, waking or dreaming, doubted its choice." He took her face in his hands as she had taken his. "I did not fall in love with Aluna. I fell in love with the woman who taught a broken man the names of stars through the gap in a shutter. I know all of you. I have always known. And I choose you, every part, the empty part, most of all, because I am empty now too, and you are the only soul alive who ever made emptiness look like something a man could live inside." And Navarra, who had spent 21 years being told there was nothing in her, felt something answer. It began behind her breastbone, in the hollow that had never once stirred a warmth, and then a heat, and then a great, slow uncurling, as though something that had slept coiled since before her birth had heard at last the one voice it had been waiting for. It did not hurt. She had braced, without knowing she braced, for it to hurt, for the filling of a lifelong emptiness to tear. Instead it was like the first breath after being underwater, like a shutter thrown open on a room that had been dark so long she had forgotten it had windows. Her knees buckled. Emmerich caught her. And through the bond, which had run one way, her whole marriage, she felt it suddenly blaze open in both directions at once. Felt him pour into her, his fear and his wonder and the vast buried love, no longer buried at all, and felt herself pour into him in return. And beneath it all, rising, opening its eyes in the dark for the very first time, a wolf. Her wolf! Hers! She could feel the whole world differently in an instant. The frost coming down the mountain, the horses in the low stable, the green sap in the garden his mother had planted. 1,000 doors flung wide that had been walls her whole life, and behind every one of them, him. The scent and the shape and the certainty of him, her mate, at last, in the way the whole pack had been born, knowing, and she alone had never been able to feel. "Emmerich," she gasped. "Emmerich, I can feel. There is, oh, I know," he breathed, and there were tears on his face, and wonder. "I can feel you, the bond. It has never gone both ways before. It never. Your wolf? It woke. It." She should have wept for joy. She had one heartbeat of it, pure and blinding. The thing her mother had sworn was only a story. The hollow filled, the sleeping thing woken, whole at last after a lifetime of empty, one heartbeat. Then she watched it happen. Watched the wonder on his face curdle into something else, as the same thought reached him that had reached her. She was whole now. She had a wolf. She was in this moment exactly the strong, true Luna the elders would follow, the mate a whole alpha deserved, and he was still hollow. She had risen as he had fallen, and the symmetry of it was a knife. He let go of her and stepped back, and she felt the resolve close over him, through the wide open bond before he even spoke. Then, "It is done," Emmerich said, and his voice was steady and terrible. You are whole, Nevera. You are everything the throne needs, and nothing I can match. When Corvin comes, declare yourself. Awoken Luna, with a true wolf. The pack will follow you against him and never miss a wolfless king. Take a real alpha and hold Caldmere and let me. If you finish that sentence, Nevara said, I will never forgive you. He stopped. Do you hear yourself? She was crying now, and did not care. You loved me when I was hollow. You knew I was empty and you chose me anyway. And it woke a wolf that 3,000 years of my blood could not. And now that I am whole, you want to hand me to someone with better teeth? She seized the front of his shirt in both fists. A wolf is not what makes you worth choosing. You taught me that. You, Emmerich, you taught me that. Up this mountain, with your senses gone and your pride in ruins, being kinder and braver and more worth loving than any whole man I have ever met. I was hollow, and you loved me. You are hollow, and I love you. That is not a thing that turns off because my chest finally learned to burn. Her voice dropped. You chose me when I was no one's choice. Well, I choose you now. And I will keep choosing you, wolf or no wolf, throne or no throne, if I have to say it every morning for the rest of our lives. And she felt it land. Felt through the open bond, the exact moment the old lie in him broke, the bone-deep certainty that he was not worth the choosing, and something new and terrified and grateful rush in to fill the crack. Nevera, he said, and it was a surrender. She kissed him. He kissed her back like a man coming up out of deep water, one hand fisting in her hair, and the other splayed wide against her back as though to hold the whole of her at once. And for a long moment there was no throne, and no naming, and no poison, and no mountain, only the two of them, and the bond roaring wide open between them. And Nevara understood, for the first time in her life, what her mother's low singing voice had meant when it called this thing a homecoming. She was not being completed by him. She had been whole all along, in the only way that ever mattered, and had simply never had anyone see it. He saw it. He had always seen it. That was the whole of the magic. When at last they broke apart, both unsteady, she pressed her brow to his and felt her newborn wolf reach down the wide open bond toward the guttered place where his had died, toward the cold ash where an alpha's wolf had been, and something there, faint as an ember under gray, stirred and turned and did not quite go out. Neither of them noticed. Below them, on the low road, the first torches of Corvin's riders came around the shoulder of the mountain, and the sky behind them was beginning, at last, to pale toward the harvest dawn. They came down to the naming together when the harvest moon rose at last, because a king does not hide from the pack he means to keep. Corvin's dawn assault had broken on the walls of Mistfell, where a handful held the one narrow road until the loyal packs Rennick had ridden for came up at their backs, and it had broken worse on the truth that rode down after. A Luna, whose wolf had woken, could not be called false. A poisoner's letter, read aloud in his own cramped hand, could not be called slander. Corvin's own riders lowered their blades rather than lift them against a true Luna, and Corvin ran, and was taken on the Voss road, and Vesper, who had spent her whole life landing on her feet, discovered that there is no soft place to land when both packs have read your name in the same ink. So it was that half the Low Country gathered at the great hall of Caldmere to see the naming that Corvin had promised would crown him, and watched instead as Emmerich came in with his Luna's hand in his, moving with a quiet ease the poison had once stolen from him. The whispers started before they reached the dais. The same whispers that had once hissed at a nobody in a stolen crown turned now to a different music. Who is she? She is radiant. Is that the wolfless girl from the marsh? It cannot be. Look how the king looks at her. Nevera heard all of it, and kept her head high, and did not hurry, and let every noble who had ever murmured behind a hand get a long, clear look at the creature they had been so certain was nothing. At the dais, Elder Marn was waiting, older and more upright than ever, and when Emmerich knelt for the naming, she set her hand on his brow and went suddenly still, and her old eyes came up to his, sharp with question. For there, faint but climbing, quiet but unmistakable, a wolf breathed again beneath the king's skin, called back from the ash by a bond that ran, now both ways. The healers had sworn it impossible. The healers, Navarra had learned, were often wrong about what love could do. The wolf chose, Elder Marn said, to the whole hall, exactly as she had said it once before. But she was smiling this time. And Vesper brought in, bound to witness the naming she had schemed a kingdom to steal, looked upon the hollow girl she had sent to a dance to fail, now whole, now wolf-blessed, now Luna of Caldmere in truth and law and love, and had at last nothing sweet to say. Emeric drew Navarra's hand into the crook of his arm, and she felt the bond glow warm and steady and whole between them, running both ways at last, and neither of them looked back at the woman in chains. They had each been sent to that choosing to be someone else's plan, a pawn, a placeholder, a lie in a borrowed gown. And somehow, past every scheme and poison meant to pull them apart, the emptiest two souls in the kingdom had looked at each other and chosen, and chosen, and chosen again. And that, in the end, was the only magic that had ever mattered. Thank you for listening. I hope this one stayed with you. Tell me honestly, do you think Emeric was right to try to set Navarra free the moment her wolf woke, believing a whole Luna deserved a whole Altha? Or was he a stubborn fool who nearly threw away the best thing he ever chose? I would love to read your verdict in the comments. Take care of yourself, and I will see you soon for another story.